Commander Vaktharis stood before the massive viewing screen aboard the Velrathi command cruiser, watching the planet Turthos 7 rotate slowly below. The planet's surface was scarred with burn marks from orbital bombardments, and even from space he could see the smoke rising from a dozen battle sites. His long fingers tapped against the control panel as he reviewed the casualty reports for the third time that morning. The numbers were worse than he had expected. The Krell Dominion had broken through every defensive line the Galactic Coalition had established. 3 star systems were now under threat, and millions of civilians were evacuating their homes. Vaktharis had served in the military for 40 cycles, fought in 7 major campaigns, and never had he seen such a complete collapse of Coalition forces. The Krell were ruthless and efficient, and they had adapted to every tactic the Coalition threw at them. A soft chime announced an incoming message. Vaktharis turned to see his second officer approaching with a data tablet. The officer's skin had turned a pale shade of blue, indicating stress and concern. "Commander, the emergency council meeting has concluded," the officer said quietly. "They have made a decision." Vaktharis took the tablet and began reading. His eyes widened as he processed the information. The council had voted to hire mercenaries. Not just any mercenaries, but human mercenaries from something called the Terran Colonial Defense Forces. He had heard of humans, of course. They were a relatively young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They had a few colonies, some trading posts, and a small military force. Why would the council hire them? He scrolled through the rest of the document. The human force consisted of only 5,000 soldiers. 5,000. The Krell had 50,000 warriors currently engaged on Turthos 7, with reinforcements arriving daily. This was madness, Vaktharis called an immediate meeting with his senior staff. When they assembled in the briefing room, he could see the same confusion on their faces. His tactical officer, a veteran of many wars, spoke first. 5,000 humans against 50,000 Krell. The council has lost their minds. Perhaps they are desperate, another officer suggested. We have lost 12,000 soldiers in the past week alone. Vaktharis remembered something then, a conversation from years ago. He had met an old commander at a military gathering, a Velrathi who had retired after 60 cycles of service. The old warrior had fought alongside humans once, in a small border conflict. When Vaktharis had asked about them, the commander's expression had changed. His voice had become serious, almost frightened. "Never underestimate the humans," the old commander had said. "They don't fight like us." "They don't think like us?" "They fight like the universe itself is trying to kill them, because for most of their history it was." At the time, Vaktharis had dismissed it as the ramblings of an old soldier. Now, standing in the briefing room with a losing war on his hands, he wondered if there was truth in those words. The human fleet arrived 3 days later. Vaktharis watched from the observation deck as their ships emerged from hyperspace. They were smaller than Coalition vessels, more compact and angular. There were only 20 ships in total, but they moved with precision, taking up defensive positions around the fleet without being asked. The human commander came aboard the Velrathi cruiser the next morning. Captain De Jong was tall for a human, with dark hair cut very short and eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him. He wore a simple uniform with minimal decorations, unlike the elaborate dress uniforms common among Coalition officers. 3 other humans accompanied him: Lieutenant Hannah, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes; Sergeant G1, a broad-shouldered man with an easy smile; and Corporal Tayman, who looked barely old enough to be a soldier but carried himself with quiet confidence. The briefing began immediately. Vaktharis presented the tactical situation, highlighting the Krell positions, their supply lines, and their defensive strengths. He expected questions about troop numbers, weapon capabilities, or orbital support. Instead, Captain De Jong asked something completely different. "What is their pain tolerance?" Vaktharis blinked. "Excuse me?" "The Krell," De Jong repeated calmly. "What is their pain tolerance? How do they respond to injury? Do they have psychological profiles we can study?" Lieutenant Hannah leaned forward. "We need to know how they think. What frightens them? What makes them angry? What are their cultural values regarding death? Victharis exchanged glances with his officers. No one had ever asked these questions before. Warfare in the galaxy was generally straightforward: establish position, exchange fire, maneuver for advantage, achieve victory or retreat. The idea of studying enemy psychology seemed strange. I am not certain we have that information, Victharis admitted. Sergeant G1 grinned. Then we'll figure it out as we go. We're good at that. The casual confidence in his voice was unsettling. These humans were about to face an enemy with 10 times their numbers, and they were smiling. They were joking. What kind of species jokes before a battle? Captain De Jong studied the tactical maps for several minutes, his eyes moving across the terrain features and troop positions. Then he pointed to a valley that the Krell were using as a main supply route. We'll hit them here first, he said simply. That position is heavily fortified, Victharis protested. Our best estimates suggest we would need 20,000 troops to take it. We'll take it with 2,000, De Jong replied. Within 48 hours. The room fell silent. Victharis wanted to argue, to explain all the reasons why this was impossible, but something in the captain's eyes stopped him. It was not arrogance. It was certainty. This human had done impossible things before. The meeting concluded with the council assigning Victharis a new role. He would serve as an official observer, embedded with the human forces to document their tactics and methods for the coalition military archives. It was partly an honor and partly a way to keep him out of the way while more experienced officers handled the actual war. At least that was what everyone thought. Victharis spent the next day preparing for his assignment. He reviewed what little information the coalition had about human military history. What he found disturbed him. Humans had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire. Their entire civilization was built on conflict. They had fought each other for thousands of years before finally uniting to explore space. Every advancement in their technology seemed to come from military research. Their medicine was developed to treat battlefield wounds. Their engineering was refined by building better weapons. They were a species forged in war. That evening, Victharis walked through the human section of the ship. He wanted to observe them before the battle began. What he saw confused him. Human soldiers were laughing together, sharing meals, showing each other pictures of their families. Some were playing games. Others were exercising or maintaining their equipment. They did not look like warriors preparing for battle. They looked like ordinary people spending time together. He paused outside a common area where a group of humans had gathered. Corporal Taemin was telling a story, and the others were listening intently. Victharis activated his translator and listened. So my grandfather told me, Taemin was saying, that fear is just your body's way of telling you that you're about to do something important. If you're not scared, you're probably not doing anything worth doing. The other humans nodded thoughtfully. One of them added, my mother used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing it. Anyway, they talked about fear the way other species talked about. Whether casually, philosophically, as if it were just another part of existence to be understood and managed. Vek. Theros returned to his quarters that night with more questions than answers. The battle would begin tomorrow, and he would finally see what humans were truly capable of. Part of him was curious. Part of him was terrified. And somewhere deep in his mind, that old commander's warning echoed again. Never underestimate the humans. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Turthos 7. Victharis gripped the safety harness tightly, his breathing controlled but rapid. Around him, 20 human soldiers sat calmly, checking their weapons and equipment. Some were sleeping. Actually sleeping, minutes before being dropped into a war zone. Lieutenant Hannah sat across from him, reviewing a tactical display on her wrist device. She noticed him staring and smiled slightly. First combat drop, Commander? I have been in many battles, Victharis replied, trying to keep his voice steady. But I have always commanded from orbit. You'll be fine, she said. Stay close to Sergeant G1. He'll keep you alive. The sergeant in question looked up from where he was sharpening a knife. An actual knife made of metal, like something from a primitive civilization? He winked at Vectharis. Don't worry, Commander. The first one is always the scariest. The transport touched down on the scorched plains of Turthos 7 with a heavy thud. The rear ramp dropped open, and immediately Vectharis could hear the sounds of distant weapons fire. The human soldiers moved out quickly, efficiently, spreading into formations that seemed random to Vectharis' trained eye. There was no tight defensive perimeter, no concentrated force. They scattered across the landscape in small groups. Vectharis activated his recording equipment and began documenting everything. He noted in his log that the humans were using poor tactical formation, that they were too spread out to provide mutual support. Any military academy in the galaxy would fail a student for such deployment, Captain. Daeyoung set up a mobile command post behind a cluster of rocks. Holographic displays materialized in the air, showing troop positions and enemy movements. The Krell forces were advancing from the north, a massive formation of heavy infantry supported by armored vehicles. Standard coalition doctrine would be to establish a defensive line and call for orbital support. All units, advance to contact, Daeyoung said calmly into his communicator. Vectharis' eyes widened. You are advancing? Toward them? That's generally how you win a battle, Juwon said from beside him. Can't kill them from back here. The human soldiers began moving forward across the open plain. They did not run. They walked steadily, weapons ready as if they were taking a casual stroll. The Krell opened fire at maximum range, energy bolts streaking across the battlefield. Vectharis expected the humans to take cover, to return fire from protected positions. Instead, they kept walking. Vectharis watched in horror as energy bolts struck human soldiers. One man was hit in the shoulder, spun around by the impact, but he simply adjusted his weapon to his other arm and continued forward. A woman took a hit to her leg, dropped to one knee, and from that position began providing covering fire for her squad mates who rushed past her. They are not retreating, Vectharis whispered into his recorder. The wounded are not retreating. This is insane. This is human, One corrected. We don't leave until the job is done. The battle intensified. The Krell, realizing the humans were not behaving like normal enemies, began to concentrate their fire. More humans fell, but the advance never stopped. Vectharis noticed something else then. The wounded soldiers were not just providing cover. They were deliberately drawing fire, making themselves targets so their healthy comrades could advance faster. They were using themselves as bait. Lieutenant. Hannah's voice crackled over the communication system. Fire mission, danger close. Coordinates sending now. Vectharis checked the coordinates she had transmitted. His blood went cold. Those coordinates are within 50 meters of human positions. The blast radius will kill our own soldiers. Artillery acknowledges, came the response. Firing in 30 seconds. Stop this, Vectharis shouted at Captain Daeyoung. You will kill your own people. Daeyoung did not look up from his displays. All forward units, artillery incoming. Take cover and prepare to assault through the impact zone. The shells screamed overhead and exploded among the Krell positions. The blasts were so close that Vectharis could see human soldiers thrown to the ground by the shockwaves. But as soon as the explosions cleared, those same soldiers were on their feet and charging forward into the smoke and fire. The Krell line wavered. Vectharis could see confusion in their movements. This was not how battles worked. Enemies were supposed to fear artillery, to retreat from it. These humans were using it as a signal to attack. Sergeant G1 tapped Vectharis on the shoulder. Come on, Commander. We're moving up. You wanted to observe, right? They advanced across the battlefield, and Vectharis saw details that his remote sensors could never capture. He saw a human soldier with a broken arm still firing his weapon one-handed. He saw another human dragging two wounded comrades toward cover, taking hits in his armor but refusing to drop them. He saw a medic running through active fire to reach an injured soldier, completely ignoring the danger. The humans reached the Krell defensive line, and something even more shocking happened. They engaged in close combat. Actual physical fighting, using knives and rifle butts and their own bodies as weapons. In civilized galactic warfare, if enemies got that close, both sides retreated to re-establish firing lines. Not humans. They seemed to prefer it. G1 laughed as they watched a human squad overwhelm a Krell position. Now this is what we're good at. Up close and personal. Vaketharis noticed that the humans were using two types of weapons. Energy rifles like the coalition forces used, but also primitive kinetic weapons that fired metal projectiles. When he asked why, Corporal Taemin, who had joined their position, explained. The energy weapons are efficient, Taemin said. But bullets sound scary. They crack and boom. They make the enemy flinch. Sometimes winning is about making the other side too afraid to fight. Psychological warfare. The humans were not just fighting physically. They were fighting mentally. The battle raged for 6 hours. Vaketharis documented everything, his recorder capturing scenes that would shock coalition military analysts for years to come. He watched humans adapt their tactics in real time, learning from each engagement and applying those lessons immediately. When the Krell tried to flank them, the humans anticipated it and had troops waiting. When the Krell concentrated their forces, the humans dispersed. When the Krell dispersed, the humans concentrated. They were fighting like water, flowing around obstacles, finding every weakness, exploiting every gap. Then something unprecedented happened. A Krell unit broke formation and retreated. Not a tactical withdrawal. A rout. They ran. Vaketharis had studied the Krell for years. They were known for their discipline, their willingness to fight to the last warrior. But these Krell warriors were running in panic, abandoning their positions and their wounded. Why are they running? Vaketharis asked. Lieutenant Hannah had joined them, her armor scorched and damaged but her expression calm. Because they finally understand what they're fighting. Another Krell position collapsed. Then another. Within an hour, the entire Krell force was in retreat. 5,000 humans had routed 50,000 Krell warriors. As the battlefield grew quiet, Vaketharis walked among the human soldiers. Medical teams were treating the wounded, and the numbers were sobering. Nearly 1,000 humans had been injured, and over 100 had died. But the survivors were not mourning. They were checking on their friends, sharing water, and in some cases actually smiling. How can you smile after this? Vaketharis asked one soldier who was having his arm bandaged. The soldier looked surprised by the question. We won, didn't we? And I'm still alive. That's worth smiling about. Captain Dae-Jung approached as Vaketharis was reviewing his recordings. Well, Commander, did you learn anything useful for your report? Vaketharis looked at the human captain, at the smoke still rising from the battlefield, at the soldiers who had just done the impossible. I learned that I have seen only the beginning. You took this position in 6 hours. You promised 48. The day is young, Dae-Jung replied. We have 2 more objectives to take before nightfall. Vaketharis felt something he had not experienced in his 40 cycles of military service. He felt genuine fear. Not fear of the enemy. Fear of his allies. These humans were not soldiers. They were something else entirely. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. And Vaketharis was beginning to understand why every retired officer who had met them spoke in hushed, frightened tones. The humans were just getting started. 2 days had passed since the first battle, and Vaketharis had not slept properly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw human soldiers walking through weapons fire, smiling as they advanced toward death. He had filed 3 reports with Coalition Command, each one more disturbing than the last. The responses he received were skeptical. Surely he was exaggerating. Surely the humans were not that different, but they were. Vaketharis requested a formal interview with Captain Dae-Jung. He needed to understand the thinking behind their tactics, the philosophy that allowed humans to fight the way they did. The captain agreed and invited him to the Human Command Center, a temporary structure set up in a captured Krell facility. Dae-Jung sat across from him, a cup of some hot earth beverage in his hands. He looked tired but alert, his eyes showing the weight of command. What do you want to know, Commander? Dae-Jung asked. Vaketharis organized his thoughts. Your tactics? They are completely unlike anything in coalition doctrine. You accept casualty rates that would cause any other force to retreat. You advance when logic says you should defend. You use your own soldiers as bait? I need to understand why. Dae-Young took a slow sip of his drink. Do you know much about Earth history, Commander? Very little. Your species only joined galactic civilization recently. Let me tell you a story, Dae-Young began. Humanity has been fighting wars for at least 10,000 years. We have records of battles, conquests, empires rising and falling. We developed agriculture, and we fought over the best land. We discovered metal, and we made better weapons. We learned to sail, and we fought on the oceans. We mastered flight, and we fought in the sky. Every single advancement in human civilization came with a new way to kill each other. Vaktharis listened, his recorder capturing every word. By the time we reached space, Dae-Young continued, we had fought 2 global wars that killed hundreds of millions of people. We created weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We looked up at the stars and hoped we would find peace out here. But we also knew we had to be ready for war. Because that is what we know best. But why? Vaktharis asked. Why so much conflict? Because Earth is a death world, Commander. Every other species in the galaxy evolved on planets that were relatively stable and safe. Earth tried to kill us from the beginning. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes. We survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on our planet. And then we fought each other because there were too many of us and not enough resources. Dae-Young set down his cup and leaned forward. You asked about acceptable losses. Here's what you need to understand. Every human alive today is descended from survivors. Our ancestors survived plagues that killed half the population. They survived famines, wars, genocides. The weak died. The unlucky died. Only the strongest, smartest, and most ruthless survived to pass on their genes. We are the children of survivors, Commander. It is in our blood. Vaktharis felt a chill run through his body. You are saying that humans are bred for warfare? I'm saying that warfare is bred into us. We do not fight to win. We fight until the enemy cannot fight anymore. There is a difference. Lieutenant Hannah entered the command center, carrying data tablets. She nodded to Vaktharis and handed one of the tablets to Dae-Young. Supply update, Captain. We are running low on medical supplies and ammunition. How long can we operate? Dae-Young asked. 3 more days at current consumption rates. Make it 5. We can conserve ammunition by using more close combat tactics. Hannah nodded and left. Vaktharis stared at Dae-Young in disbelief. You plan to operate for 5 days with 3 days of supplies? That is impossible. It is difficult, Dae-Young corrected. Not impossible. Humans are very good at doing more with less. We had to be. Our planet did not give us easy survival. Vaktharis decided to visit the human medical facilities next. He needed to see for himself how they dealt with their wounded. What he found was both impressive and horrifying. The medical center was clean and efficient, with human doctors and medics working quickly to treat injured soldiers. But what struck Vaktharis was the attitude of the patients. They were not resigned to their fate or grateful to be alive. They were angry that they were missing the fighting. One soldier with bandages covering half his body was arguing with a doctor. I can still shoot with one arm, the soldier insisted. Send me back out there. You need at least 3 more days of treatment, the doctor replied firmly. The war might be over in 3 days. My squad needs me. The doctor eventually sedated the soldier. She noticed Vaktharis watching and walked over to him. You are the coalition observer, yes? Commander Vaktharis? Yes, I am trying to understand your people. The doctor smiled sadly. Good luck with that. I have been human my entire life and I still do not understand us completely. Why do your soldiers want to return to combat? They are injured. They should be relieved to be safe. Because their friends are still out there, the doctor explained. Human soldiers do not fight for concepts like honor or glory, not really. They fight for each other. They fight because the person next to them is depending on them. Letting down your comrades is worse than death. Vaketharis thought about this. Your species has a very strong pack-bonding instinct. You could say that. We evolved as social animals. Cooperation is how we survived. A human alone is vulnerable. But humans together? We can achieve anything. That evening, Vaketharis was invited to observe a human cultural practice. Sergeant G1 had organized what they call the Remembrance ceremony for the soldiers who had died in the first 2 days of fighting. Vaketharis expected something somber and sad. Instead, the humans told stories. They shared memories of their fallen comrades, laughing at funny moments and crying at touching ones. They sang songs, old Earth songs about warriors and heroes. They drank alcohol and toasted to the dead. Do you not mourn them? Vaketharis asked G1. Of course we mourn them, one replied. But we also celebrate them. They died doing something important. They died protecting others. In human culture, there is no greater honor than dying for a cause you believe in. But they are dead. They have lost everything. G1 looked at him seriously. Have they? Their names will be remembered. Their families will know they were brave. Their sacrifice meant something. In a way, Commander, they achieved immortality. Vaketharis was beginning to understand something fundamental about humans. They had made peace with death, not in a depressed or nihilistic way, but in an accepting way. They knew they would die eventually, so when the time came, they wanted it to mean something. The next day, Vaketharis received reports of a Krell atrocity. A human patrol had been captured, and the Krell had executed them and left their bodies as a warning. When this news reached the human forces, something changed. The casual joking stopped. The easy smiles disappeared. The humans became focused with an intensity that made Vaketharis nervous. Corporal Taemin's squad requested permission to conduct a raid on the Krell unit responsible. Captain De-Young approved it immediately. You are encouraging a revenge mission? Vaketharis asked. I am allowing my soldiers to do what needs to be done, De-Young replied coldly. The Krell violated the rules of warfare. They must learn that such actions have consequences. The raid happened that night. Taemin's squad infiltrated the Krell camp, eliminated the entire unit responsible for the executions, and left a message written in Krell language. We do not forgive. We do not forget. When Vaketharis expressed his concern about this escalation, Lieutenant Hannah explained the human concept of vendetta. It is not about revenge, she said. It is about justice. The Krell need to understand that killing prisoners will not intimidate us. It will make us more determined. They need to fear what happens when they cross certain lines. Vaketharis spent the next several days reviewing footage from various battles. He watched humans fight on broken legs, dragging themselves forward when they could no longer walk. He saw a soldier with a piece of shrapnel embedded in his chest continue giving orders for 20 minutes before collapsing. He witnessed acts of courage that defied explanation. One evening, he asked Sergeant G1 to explain human endurance. G1 thought for a moment. We have a saying on Earth, pain is temporary, but pride is forever. It means that the physical discomfort you feel now will pass, but the memory of what you accomplished will last your entire life. When you are hurt, you have a choice. You can quit or you can push through. Most humans choose to push through. Even when pushing through might kill you, especially then, because that is when it matters most. Vaketharis realized something that night. The humans were not just effective warriors. They were dangerous in a way that went beyond military capability. They were dangerous because they did not fear death the way other species did. They respected it, prepared for it, but they did not let it control them. In his report that evening, Vaketharis wrote, We invited demons to fight our devils. I am no longer certain which is more frightening. The Krell fortress Omega Prime stood like a mountain of metal and stone. Rising from the desert landscape of Turthos 7, it was the command center for all Krell operations in this sector, housing their leadership and strategic resources, coalition. Analysts had studied the fortress for weeks and concluded that taking it would require a months-long siege with overwhelming forces. Captain De Jong had proposed taking it in 72 hours with the forces they had. The coalition commanders had laughed. Then they realized he was serious. Vectharis stood in the human command briefing, watching as De Jong outlined his plan. It was insane. It involved simultaneous attacks from multiple directions, infiltration teams, psychological warfare, and what humans called acceptable losses that would horrify any other military force. The fortress has 3 main defensive layers, De Jong explained, pointing to the holographic display. Heavy weapons on the outer walls, automated defense systems in the middle zones, and elite guards protecting the inner command center. Standard coalition approach would be to bombard it from orbit and then send in ground forces. But that would take too long and cause too many civilian casualties in the surrounding area. So what is your approach? Asked one of the coalition officers present. We are going to make them think we are doing a standard assault, De Jong said. While we actually infiltrate from below, above, and through weak points they do not know they have. Lieutenant Hanna manipulated the display, showing underground tunnels and maintenance shafts. We have studied Krell construction methods. They build strong walls but often neglect internal security. They assume if you cannot get through the front door, you cannot get in at all. They have never fought humans before, Sergeant G1 added with a grin. We are very good at finding doors that do not exist. Vectharis made a decision then. I want to be with the infiltration team. I need to see this firsthand. The human officers exchanged glances. Finally, De Jong nodded. You will go with Lieutenant Hanna's team, but you will follow orders exactly as given. Hesitation can get everyone killed. The assault began at midnight. The humans preferred fighting at night, something that made sense once Vectharis learned about their natural abilities. Human eyes were surprisingly effective in low light, and their technology enhanced this advantage even further. While the Krell relied heavily on artificial lighting and sensors, humans could move through darkness like predators. Vectharis wore light armor provided by the humans and carried a recording device. He followed Hanna and her 12-soldier team as they approached the fortress from the east, moving silently through the rocky terrain. Above them, the sky lit up with explosions as Captain De Jong's main force began their diversionary assault on the front gates. The Krell responded exactly as predicted, concentrating their forces on the obvious threat. Hanna's team reached a drainage vent that, according to their intelligence, connected to the fortress's lower levels. 2 human engineers worked quickly to remove the grate, their tools making almost no sound. Inside, Hanna whispered, stay close and stay quiet. The tunnel was narrow and dark, barely wide enough for a human to crawl through. Vectharis, with his larger frame, found it extremely uncomfortable. But the humans moved through it like it was nothing, their breathing controlled and calm. Vectharis realized they had probably trained for exactly this kind of infiltration. After 20 minutes of crawling, they emerged into a maintenance corridor inside the fortress. The air was thick with the smell of machinery and recycled atmosphere. Hanna used hand signals to organize her team, and they moved forward with practiced precision. They encountered their first patrol 5 minutes later. 4 Krell soldiers walking the corridor, weapons at ready. Hanna made a quick gesture. 4 human soldiers moved forward silently, and before the Krell could react, they were subdued without a single shot fired. The humans used some kind of nerve strike, hitting specific points on the Krell bodies that caused instant unconsciousness. Learned that from the last species we fought, one human whispered to Vectharis. Works on most carbon-based life forms. They continued deeper into the fortress. Vectharis noticed something disturbing. At certain intersections, Hanna's team would leave small objects behind. When he asked about them, Corporal Taemin, who was part of this infiltration team, explained. Psychological markers, Taemin said quietly. We are leaving signs that we have been here. Small things that the Krell will find but not immediately understand. It will make them paranoid, make them wonder how many of us are inside. You are deliberately frightening them? Fear is a weapon, Commander. Sometimes the most effective one. They reached a major corridor and had to wait while a large Krell patrol passed. Vectharis held his breath, certain they would be discovered. But the humans remained perfectly still, blending into the shadows. One Krell soldier looked directly at their position, and Vectharis was sure they were caught. But the Krell's eyes moved past them, unable to perceive the motionless humans, predator instinct. Humans could remain so still that prey animals simply did not see them. The infiltration continued for 3 hours. They disabled security systems, planted explosives at strategic points, and gathered intelligence on Krell command structure, all without raising an alarm. Vectharis documented everything, his recorder, capturing the incredible skill and coordination of the human team. At one point, they found themselves trapped between 2 Krell patrols. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Hannah made a decision instantly. "We go up," she said, pointing at the ceiling panels. The humans quickly climbed up into the ceiling space, pulling Vectharis up with them. They moved above the patrols, traveling through maintenance spaces that were never meant to support living beings. It was hot, cramped, and dangerous. But the humans navigated it like they had done it 1,000 times before, because they probably had. The main assault intensified outside. Vectharis could hear explosions and weapons fire even through the fortress walls. He knew that Captain De Young's forces were taking casualties, dying to maintain the distraction. And they did it willingly, trusting that Hannah's team would accomplish their mission. They reached the command level just before dawn. This section was heavily guarded, with Krell elite warriors stationed at every entrance. Hannah studied the situation and then activated her communicator. "Command, we are in position. Ready for final phase." "Acknowledged," came De Young's voice. "Stand by for fireworks." 10 seconds later, all the explosives that Sergeant G1's demolition teams had planted throughout the fortress detonated simultaneously. Not enough to destroy the structure, but enough to cause chaos and confusion. Lights went out, alarms blared. Krell soldiers ran in every direction, trying to understand what was happening. In that chaos, Hannah's team struck. They moved through the command level like a storm, hitting targets with perfect precision. Vectharis watched in awe as humans cleared rooms in seconds, their movements coordinated without even speaking. They used hand signals, eye contact, and what seemed like instinctive understanding of each other's intentions. The Krell defenders fought back hard. Energy bolts filled the corridors. Several humans were hit and went down. But even wounded, they continued to fight. Vectharis saw one soldier with a severe leg injury drag himself to a doorway and provide covering fire for his advancing squad mates. They reached the central command room. The Krell leadership was there, along with their most elite guards. This would be the hardest fight. Hannah did not hesitate. She threw a device into the room that emitted a blinding flash and a deafening sound. The Krell were disoriented for just a few seconds, but that was enough. The humans poured into the room, engaging at close range where their superior reflexes and aggression gave them the advantage. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. When it was over, the Krell commander stood alone, surrounded by human weapons pointed at him. His guards were down, his officers were captured. His fortress was taken, and then something happened that shocked Vectharis more than anything else he had witnessed. The Krell commander surrendered. Krell never surrendered. Their culture valued death over defeat. But this commander looked at the humans surrounding him and chose to live. Vectharis realized why. The commander was not just defeated. He was terrified. Captain De Young arrived 30 minutes later, his armor scorched and damaged. He looked at Hannah and nodded. "Casualties?" 40% wounded, 15% killed, Hannah reported. "Mission accomplished in 52 hours. De Young turned to the Krell commander and spoke in the Krell language, which surprised everyone. "Your fortress is taken, your forces are defeated. Order your remaining troops to stand down, and no more blood will be shed today." The Krell commander complied immediately. Later, as human medics treated both human and Krell wounded with equal care, Vectharis sat with a dying human soldier. The woman had taken a fatal hit protecting a wounded comrade. She had minutes left to live. "I am sorry," Vectharis said, not knowing what else to say. The woman smiled weakly. "Don't be sorry, Commander. I did what I came here to do. I protected my people." I would do it all again. She died 30 seconds later, that smile still on her face. Vectaris realized then what made humans truly terrifying. It was not their tactics, or their technology, or their endurance. 1 month after the human intervention began, the war was over. Not officially, not with treaties and ceremonies, but effectively. The Krell Dominion had pulled back from all contested systems and requested negotiations. Their military leaders spoke privately of nightmares, of enemies that would not stop, of warriors who smiled as they died. Vectaris sat in his quarters aboard the Velrathi command cruiser, staring at the massive report he had compiled. 3,000 pages of documentation, analysis, tactical breakdowns, and philosophical observations about human warfare. It was the most comprehensive study ever done on human military capabilities. And it terrified him. He had been summoned to present his findings to the Coalition High Council. They wanted to understand what had happened, why 5,000 humans had accomplished what 50,000 Coalition soldiers could not. Vectaris knew his report would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The council chambers were impressive. A massive room with representatives from 27 different species arranged in a circle. Vectaris stood in the center, his data displayed on holographic screens surrounding him. The council members looked at him expectantly. "Honored Council," Vectaris began, his voice carrying across the chamber. "You asked me to observe human military tactics and provide an analysis. I have done so. But I must warn you that what I have learned goes far beyond simple tactical doctrine. What I've learned explains why everyone fears humans." He activated the first set of displays showing casualty statistics. The human forces suffered a 42% casualty rate over the course of the campaign. By Coalition standards, this would be considered catastrophic losses requiring immediate withdrawal. The humans never once considered retreating. Their mission success rate was 100%. A council member from the Delphian species raised a tentacle. Surely such losses are unsustainable. How can they maintain military effectiveness with such casualties? Because humans do not measure effectiveness the same way we do, Vectaris explained. They measure it by mission accomplishment, not by survival rates. Every single objective they set was achieved, regardless of cost. He moved to the next display, showing tactical adaptations. Human adaptability is unlike anything we have encountered. They learn from every engagement and immediately apply those lessons. They fought 12 major battles during this campaign. By the 12th battle, they were using Krell tactics against the Krell, but with human improvements. They evolve faster than any species should be able to. Another council member spoke. Adaptability is good, but it does not explain their effectiveness. Then let me explain persistence, Vectaris said, activating footage of human soldiers continuing to fight despite severe injuries. Humans have a phrase, they never know when to quit. This is not an exaggeration. I personally witnessed humans fighting with broken bones, severe burns, and life-threatening injuries. They do not stop until they physically cannot continue. The council watched in silence as the footage played. A human soldier with half his body covered in burns still directing his squad. Another human dragging herself forward with a shattered leg to reach a wounded comrade. A third human providing covering fire even as he slowly bled out from multiple wounds. "This is not courage," one council member whispered. "This is madness." "It is both," Vectaris agreed. "And it is also something more. It is what happens when a species evolves on a death world, when survival requires pushing past pain and fear, when giving up means extinction." He moved to his analysis of human innovation. Humans weaponize everything. They improvise constantly. During the siege of Fortress Omega Prime, I watched them use maintenance tunnels as invasion routes, sealing spaces as transportation corridors, and their own psychological warfare techniques to make the enemy paranoid and afraid. They do not follow standard doctrine because they are constantly inventing new doctrine. The displays showed human engineers turning construction equipment into weapons, medics using medical supplies to create chemical smoke screens, and regular soldiers constructing defensive positions from whatever materials were available. But the most frightening aspect of human warfare, Victharis continued, is their psychological approach. Humans form bonds with their comrades that override self-preservation instincts. They will die for each other without hesitation. This creates a military force where every soldier fights not just for victory, but for the survival of their friends. It makes them unpredictable and incredibly dangerous. He showed footage of human soldiers refusing medical evacuation to stay with their units, of wounded humans dragging themselves back into battle, of entire squads choosing to fight hopeless engagements to buy time for other units to succeed. A council member from the Vassian collective stood. You are describing a military force that is essentially unstoppable. Surely they have weaknesses? They do, Victharis admitted. They are mortal. They can be killed. But killing them is not the same as defeating them. Even when humans lose, they learn. Even when they die, they inspire others. Their weakness is that they care deeply about their people, but this weakness is also their strength because it makes them fight harder. He advanced to his most disturbing finding. Humans have accepted death as inevitable. Not in a nihilistic way, but in a philosophical way. They have decided that since death is certain, what matters is how you die and what you die for. This removes one of the most powerful deterrents in warfare, the fear of dying. The council chamber was silent now. Every representative was staring at the displays, at the footage of humans doing impossible things, at the statistics that should not exist. Victharis played his final piece of evidence, footage of the Krell commander surrendering at Fortress Omega Prime. The Krell have never surrendered before. Their culture views it as the ultimate dishonor. But this commander looked at the humans surrounding him and chose life over death, because he understood something that took me weeks to learn. Humans do not stop. Not ever. Fighting them is not about winning a battle. It is about surviving until they decide the war is over. He deactivated the displays and faced the council directly. You ask me why everyone fears humans? Here is my answer. Humans are adaptable enough to learn any tactic. They are persistent enough to never quit. They are innovative enough to weaponize anything. They are psychologically bonded enough to die for each other. And they have accepted mortality in a way that makes them effectively fearless. They are not the strongest species. They are not the smartest. But they are the most dangerous because they combine all these factors into a military force that cannot be broken. The council deliberated for several hours. Victharis waited outside the chambers, reviewing his notes. Finally, he was called back inside. The council chairperson spoke. Commander Victharis, your report has been reviewed. We have a question. Should we restrict human military contracts? Are they too dangerous to employ? Victharis had expected this question. He had thought about it extensively. With respect, Chairperson, I believe restricting them would be a mistake. Better to have humans as allies than as enemies. Because if we ever find ourselves on the opposite side of a human military force, we will understand what the Krell learned. Humans do not fight to win. They fight until you cannot fight anymore. The motion to restrict human contracts failed. Instead, the Council authorized expanded cooperation with human military forces and requested that Victharis serve as a liaison officer to help other species understand how to work with humans effectively. Before the human forces departed Turthos 7, Victharis met with Captain De Jong one final time. They stood on an observation deck, watching the planet slowly heal from the scars of war. Your report, De Jong said quietly. What did you conclude? That humans are terrifying, Victharis replied honestly, but also that you hate war as much as anyone. We do, De Jong confirmed. We are very good at war, but that does not mean we enjoy it. Every battle we fight, we remember the cost. Every soldier we lose, we mourn. We do not want to be warriors. We just are. Lieutenant Hanna joined them, followed by Sergeant G1 and Corporal Taemin. They had all been promoted and decorated by their command, though they wore their medals with quiet humility rather than pride. The Krell are requesting a cultural exchange, Hannah mentioned. They want to understand us better. They want to make sure they never have to fight us again, Ruan corrected with a slight smile. Can you blame them? Taemin asked. We scared them badly. Victharis listened to their conversation, these humans who could be so casual about warfare and death. He thought about something Sergeant G1 had told him during the campaign. We are the nice ones. You should see humans when we are actually angry. The thought still gave him chills. Commander, Dae-Young said, extending his hand in the human gesture of respect. Thank you for trying to understand us. I know it was not easy. Victharis accepted the handshake, noting the careful strength in the human's grip. I observed you enter the battlefield and finally understood why everyone fears you. Not because you are monsters, but because when survival demands it, you become whatever is necessary. And you are very, very good at it. That is probably the best summary anyone has ever given, Dae-Young said.